This is Women Ending War, the podcast where you'll discover that there is another path, that peace is possible, and that the women here can lead the way. I'm Dr. Ilana Stockman. I'm here with Eva Dalek, my co-host. Welcome. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Shalom aleichem. Ilana.
How are you today, Eva?
I'm great. So excited about the discussion today.
Yes, I'm excited today. Today we're talking about peace building. We're talking about grassroots activism. We're talking about conflict resolution and the hard work of bringing peace. We have two phenomenal interviewees today. I'm super excited. We have first Dr. Fakhira Halloun, who has a doctorate in conflict resolution and has worked for the UN and is working for the UN in this area. So we're excited to hear about your work. And we have Yael Treidel, who I've known for several years. Yael is a longtime peace activist, very active in many organizations, including a political party that we were involved in together a few years ago called Pashut Hava. I had to mention it. It's one of the few all women's political parties that's ever run. Yael Treidel works as a coordinator with the organization Road to Recovery, a super interesting organization. I also volunteer with them, and I'm really eager to talk about the work and what they do. So, shall we get started?
Yeah, let's start.
Okay, so first we'll start with Dr. Fakhira Halloun. Halloun, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share about our journey and search in time of a very difficult time.
Very difficult time.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about what you do with conflict resolution and what you do with the UN.
Yeah, so I just like I want to have a correction just for you, Ilana. So I used to work at the UN from 2020 until 2021 at the UN of the Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace, which I worked as the first consultant for the civil society and peace building, which my role was to bring to search or to map the peace building efforts between Palestinians and Israelis of the civil society efforts that are aiming to end the occupation and to solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in a peace solution. And my role was to see these efforts and to empower the efforts that we think that really goes in alignment with the UN mission as well, and also to find opportunities in both sides and to coordinate and to consult between them and maybe to link sometimes Palestinian and Israeli peace activists and to empower them in time of conflict. And because it's not an easy time, and also to help in redefine what is peace building in certain time, because the definition of peace building is crucial in a way that sometimes working in peace building can duplicate the same reality in the name of peace building and do not really make a change and structural change, but you have really to know what is the definition of peace building in certain time. And this is a crucial insights that I got from this work, because not each effort of peace building can consider as a successful or as a approach that make a difference. Anyway, we can talk about this a lot, because what's the definition of peace building in the context of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and who define peace building?
I think especially right now in this challenging time, I think peace building, the field of peace building is being shaken to the core of it. And I like to refer to it as peace activation rather than peace activism. And peace building come from like the era of peacemaking, peace building, peacekeeping. I used to work for the UN peacekeeping mission in Ivory Coast. And so I know very well this distinction. And for me, it's really like right now we have a great opportunity actually to redefine this peace building specifically on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Exactly. Because it has shaken the foundation of peace building, but it has also shaken the foundation of the international system that actually brought to be the UN, the United Nations in 1945.
Totally.
So how would you be redefining? What are your definitions?
What is my definition for peace building? It's, for me, I guess, Palestinian and Israeli, if they are working together now, they should really work for ending the occupation and ending the violent structure of the Israeli occupation, and at the same time situating this approach in thinking about solution and working for solution, but not to deny the structural violence that's going on and colonizations that going on for a long time, and the peace building need to touch upon the structural violence and destabilize it and break it and mobilize people to change the structure in a way that give legitimacy for both people to be in this homeland, and also for equality and freedom and security for both sides. So it should challenge both people, but at the same time, it should not ignore the unbalance in the power relationship and the structural violence, and usually the peace building. And you should also ask who's defining and who's the main donors for
Exactly,
peace building in the Israeli-Palestinian field. It's a crucial question that we need to ask, and by asking this question, you will understand why the peace building in Israel-Palestine do not make a political change, because the main donors define it not in a way that it will make a political change.
Okay. I think there's something I would like to add here. I think what you're referring to is conflict transformation as defined by John Galtung, which really refers to structural violence and working with root causes of conflict, which specifically in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict hasn't been tackled by none of the organization working in the peace field. And that's why peace became a really bad word for Palestinian and also for Israelis, because it was really, rather than peace building, we did peace management.
Exactly.
We didn't build peace, we just managed the conflict. We're doing conflict management versus conflict transformation, and missing the opportunity for real transformational change for both people.
Totally. And we need to reclaim the right definition of peace, because peace means that both sides will get their rights in a way that equality and freedom and security, not to use the peace building as an approach that will serve one side, as it's happening now, that it's serving the Israeli side.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Because the peace building for now was like in the last few years also was built according to like the definition that it's economical peace. We want to have Palestine and Israeli work about economic projects or about friendship, or to touch about the relationship, but without to touch really to mobilize them to change the reality or to protest the occupation or to think how they will change the unbalanced power relationship. Like peace building need to be in a way that you mobilize the Israelis and Palestinians to struggle against the occupation in a way that it might be not necessarily a violent way, but to struggle, and in the way that also give a hope for both sides that they can be living together in the same homeland with cooperation, not necessarily separation. Okay, the approach that also all this slogan of two-state solution that we have been also working. The peace building field was built also on the Oslo Agreement and in the two-state solution, and it has been going in a way that not really tackling the root causes of the conflict, and that's why also the Palestinians lost trust in the peace building and they left it. So who remain in the peace building in the last 10-20 years is the Israelis and international and mainly Americans, because the main donors are Americans. Okay, the big donation is from America, and so who define this peace building is the approach, the international and the Israelis, and the Palestinians. Most of them quit it, and when you are not part of the peace building, so you are not also part in shaping it. So there is also a price that they also left the peace building field. So it was shaped in a way that it served the interests of the Israelis and the international without to reflect truly the demand of the Palestinians and their right for self-determination and their rights for collective rights. Okay, so it somehow it worked, but it didn't change the reality of the Palestinians.
But I think, absolutely. And I think here we also need to reflect on the fact that the Palestinians left the field and only it became the business of peace building and the business of conflict resolution. But when you leave the space, well, the space is going to be occupied by those who have interest.
Totally.
And so there's a responsibility here also for the Palestinians to reflect on, especially after the Oslo Accord, who was aiming towards a solution, but that the vision got lost in the mixed, I think.
Can we go back for a second to, you were talking about structural violence and root causes. I think that there are a lot of people who don't know what that is referring to. Can you flesh that out a little bit, what you mean by structural violence and what you consider to be root causes?
Like structural violence, like if we look now to the situation between Palestinians and Israelis, Israel controlled the daily life of the Palestinians in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and also in Gaza, let's say the siege in Gaza since 2006, which means it means that they control their daily life, which means the freedom of movement, they control it. They control their basic rights. You know, like Palestinians to move from one place to other, they have to go in checkpoints, they have to go in humanization. They also have their lands has been taken in the last decades by settlements. Like it became, all their lands became shrinking. So the settlers are surrounding their lands and taking all the natural resources. And it's not just taking the natural resources. There is extreme increase in the violence of the settlers toward the Palestinians that we can see it each day. But now, and the Israeli backing that, like there is not just control, it's justified, because there is also this dynamic of master and slavery, you know, like it's the master and slavery that we have to see it, that it has been in the last 70 years of occupation. And there's a blurring the borders. Now you cannot know where's the West Bank and where is Israel. And we cannot ignore that most of the Israelis, or the Israel society is going to the right wing, to extreme right wing, which think that the whole area should be Israel, and Palestinians need to agree for that, and if they don't agree, they have to leave, or they have to be treated or punished for not accepting the mastery of Israel. And also the destroyment of the houses, also the arrestment. Like you have to see, like all of their daily life is controlled by Israel. Israel can now go inside Ramallah and arrest people and humiliate them and do whatever, and they cannot do anything because it's under occupation. Okay, and not just
I would add under occupation with the illusion of a Palestinian Authority that is soi-disant controlling their life, which is not. It's the Palestinian Authority, with what the Oslo Accord established, is a Palestinian Authority that became the servant of the Israeli military occupation. Yeah. And this is something that people are not really aware of.
Definitely, and weakening the Palestinian Authority. Israel also weakened the Palestinian Authority in the last 2 decades, which also they're losing their trust within the Palestinian society. But also we have to see, like really, if you go to the West Bank, you cannot think that this is West Bank. You cannot see, like it's a continuation of Israel, and the control of the settlers control the settlers to the Palestinian life, and feeling that there is no law, that nobody can stop them. Okay, you can see
no man's land.
Yeah,
no.
If you can see a lot of videos of settlers killing Palestinians that going to their land just for what we say, harvest the oil, the olive oil, and harvest the olive oil, and you see settlers just killing, like beating them, and the soldiers watching. This scene can tell you a lot about what's mean occupation, that who's the master here. Okay, and we cannot ignore the mindset of the majority of the Israelis that looking to the Palestinians, that they are in low status, and they are here who control everything, and they have the legitimacy to do anything toward the Palestinians, and nobody will stop them. I mean, the mindset itself also part of what mean occupation for a long time, and the culture of occupier, and the culture of people who are under occupation. Okay, and we cannot ignore the arrestment. You know how many children are in the Israeli jail without any trial, and this is just because a child like 13 or even 7 might be just provoking a soldier. Okay,
because the army can do that. The army can detain people for 6 months without charge, and then they can extend it for another 6 months without charge. And
it's like to control each aspect in your life. This is what what occupation mean, and this is how children in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem see Israelis in the this image of the occupier, not in the human side.
Right. Let's go to Yael now, because Yael is very involved with Road to Recovery, and I think Road to Recovery is one of the organizations that is trying to, at least create not a solution, not going to root causes. It's not a root cause solution. It's trying to make daily life a little bit better for certain people, if possible. But tell us about Road to Recovery.
Road to Recovery, it's an organization that created a network of Israeli volunteers who help Palestinian patients, most of them with severe diseases, cancer and others that are life-threatening, to come to treatments in Israel, in Israeli hospitals. The thing for the Palestinians is that because of the state of Palestine, many of the hospitals, there are no hospitals with very high level of care. So they need these. They need to get these treatments in hospitals in Israel, but these treatments are paid by the Palestinian Authority. But the Palestinian Authority does not cover the travel, and sometimes people need 3 times a week, or sometimes we have patients to go every day. And the whole thing started because the founder, Yuval Roth, he's a member of the Bereaved Family Forum, because his brother was murdered by Palestinians. And he was approached by Palestinian members in this forum, and they asked for his help to get to the hospital because they don't have enough money to do this. So he started doing it just voluntarily. But then suddenly he got more and more requests, and very soon it became very clear that this is just a serious need, because people in Palestine before Road to Recovery was there, people in Palestine sometimes just died because they didn't have enough money for travel.
And also they can't always get permits, right? Is that true? Also, there's an issue with permits.
So the permits are actually most people who need, they need 2 things. They need the coverage from the Palestinian Authority, and they need the permit from the Israeli military governor. How you call it?
Governing.
Yeah. And these are usually given. You have to remember that hospitals make a lot of money from these patients, because it's like
private. They're sort of getting private coverage from the Palestinian
It's like
Authority.
it's like when people come from abroad too. It's like a medical tourism.
Yeah.
So they get a lot of money. So there is an interest to actually have these patients coming in. But the hospitals, for example, for the most, don't cover. Also, don't arrange for travel. So literally, these people who are mostly really sick are just left to the with no solution. So this is where we come in. We have hundreds of people who just, they're people who are having their own life, on jobs, and voluntarily come in the morning. People are coming to pick up patients from the checkpoint to the hospital. And then when these patients finish, they let us know, and we send people to take them back.
So I've done that. I've done that a whole bunch of times, taking people from the hospital back to their checkpoints. And it's always strange to me. There's 2 experiences. One experience is the understanding that hospitals are a form of shared society, right? Hospitals are like one of the few places where you actually have, mixed and as human beings, like everybody's, 2 people are going through cancer at the same time. Like they're not talking necessarily about, their politics and identity necessarily. I mean, that is not 100% true, but a lot of times Israeli hospitals are sort of held up as this place of shared society because everybody there becomes just human beings. Unfortunately, that's not the way the rest of Israel is, but it is interesting that the Road to Recovery experience is one of sort of trying to humanize each other and understand that we're all in this together and that life is fragile and that we're all vulnerable, and it sort of creates, something else. But at the same time, every time I do this drive, it always makes me like angry because I'm like, why should we have to do this? Why?
Yeah.
Why? And it feels like I'm holding space with somebody else's humiliation. A guy who's taking his 3-year-old child for, some heart surgery, and it's like he wants to do his own driving. He wants to take care of his child. He doesn't want to have to sit around waiting for some volunteer. And so it's always like a reminder of, what are we doing here? Like, what is this?
Normalization.
What is that? And so, and so Road to Recovery is like amazing because I do feel like they talk about, you talk about the little moments of peacemaking, right? Every time we drive together in the car, there are these real connections and it would be better if I spoke better Arabic, okay? Which it's a big incentive for me actually to work on my Arabic. But like, it is true, there are these moments of humanization, but it's also really highlights to me each time, like, what is this?
Look, as a coordinator, I deal all the time. People sometimes don't get their permit because it's not only the patient, they come with an escort, somebody who comes with them. So sometimes the escort didn't get a permit, and sometimes they don't know until the last minute. And this is why this is a very complex kind of structure. But the thing is, but it's not only that, I sometimes, for example, people who come from villages near Jenin or from Jenin and need to get to the checkpoint. Sometimes, especially during war, which is, everything gets much worse. They have extra blocks on the road. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they have so much shooting around, they just can't leave the house. Sometimes, and we never know. And the thing is, like you said, I think this organization is not ambitious. We're not trying to solve the Middle East problem. Mm-hmm. I think the main thing is we're just trying to do good. Mm-hmm. We're just trying to help people who need help. This is why on the 8th of October we were there and picked up the very few in the first day. There were only very few that got the permit, or that had the courage. Also, just imagine to come cross the. You have to travel to the checkpoint where at like sometimes 4:00 in the morning because you're being picked up at 5 or 6 o'clock with a baby, and any soldier can stop you on the way and search for you have to have all your identifications and everything, and if you forgot something, they can just literally just send you back home. Mm. Or especially in the beginning of the war, also a lot of the soldiers were very edgy. Mm. Literally, they were afraid that somebody, even not intentionally, not to talk about intentionally, will shoot. And then you go all this. So there is something also, I have to say, sometimes, because when I drive, I do it usually in the morning. Sometimes I'm like so tired, I literally sit in my car, and in like 5 minutes, it's like dead quiet. Everybody is asleep. Mm. I don't put the radio. I drive really trying not to go, over bumps and everything, and to me, it just kind of like it's, I don't know, heartwarming that they trust enough to just get in the car and fall asleep.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
But it's awful. Also, you think of these people that have to travel sometimes hours because many times we cannot get them a volunteer, especially on the way back. We cannot get them the volunteer. Sometimes they finish at 11 and we only find a volunteer at 4. It happens. We try to do it as fast as possible, but it happens. And then they go home and then they have to do it again. And sometimes I think, how can you get better? If you come to our hospital, you do all this treatment. But but at the same time, it's also saving lives. Mm-hmm. And also it creates connection. And when you called me, I told you I'm not a very positive and optimistic activist these days.
Why?
But
Do you want to talk to that for a minute?
yeah, but I'll just say,
Uh,
but in these drives, if someday this horrible violence and craziness and will finish, there is maybe there will be somebody who will remember that Israeli took them, and maybe the Israelis will. There's something in
Something
this
about the humanization of the other. And I think what you're
Yes.
speaking to is the feminine quality of caregiving and this act of just being very practical and logistics. So we're not discussing who's wrong, who's right.
No.
We're just like, you have a need, I'm going to make my best to answer this need. And I think that speaks a lot to the humanity of each other, which is really crucial in times of war, where people are being dehumanized and where sides are being polarized. And I love what you're sharing right now. And I think that the road to recovery is really the symbol of this volunteer waiting to drive from both sides, drive
Well, I'll
to
give
get
you a
to
few
this. Yeah.
examples. For example, just about that, I remember in the beginning of the war, there was a lot of discussion also between the volunteers. And I remember a volunteer saying that she felt that when she felt that they hated her or something, that she felt. And another volunteer said, I don't give them a loyalty test. I don't give them, I don't care if they hate me or not.
love me.
I am doing it because they need it.
Yeah,
They need
exactly,
it.
yeah.
I am privileged enough to be able to drive here freely and take them, and that I'm doing it. And I thought this was just it, because there was
the
also this
compassion.
are they Hamas, are they there,
Yeah,
are they there?
yeah.
And it's not
Who cares?
it's a 3-year-old kid.
Yeah.
He's not a terrorist. He's a kid. And so that was part of it. And also, can I tell it like just
Sure,
from the
go
last 2 weeks, like a couple of very moving stories. Like, for example, last week, there was one patient that we drove quite a lot. And actually that day, the hospital told her this is the last time. They said there's nothing more we can do. So there was literally just like a few days left. And I knew that. I was on the coordination team, and I knew that. And it was a day that was very hard to find volunteers. And I was thinking, if for anybody, for this one who had only like a few days left, we need to find for her a volunteer quickly. And she came from Ichilov, and nobody likes to go to Ichilov because it's the center of Tel Aviv, horrible traffic. And I managed to find a woman who really didn't want it. Was her one free day a week, and I found her, and she really didn't want to go, but she decided to go. And she took the patient, and a couple of days later, the patient died. And I thought there was something very powerful. Also, this volunteer, she wrote about it, how powerful it is. It's just the human thing of it, of meeting of having the privilege to do a service to just a beautiful human being in her last couple of days. And it really doesn't matter, what's her religion or what's her nationality. And the other thing was, we had just a couple of days before, I was looking for volunteers. There was a volunteer that really wanted to help, but he couldn't. And then at 10 o'clock at night, we got an emergency request for a child in Hebron that needed to go to Sheba. And so I put a message out. In 10 minutes, he called and said, I couldn't come earlier, but I can come now. And at 10 o'clock at night, he left his home and he went and took, it's a long drive from people who don't know the country. It's from the area of Hebron to go to Tel Aviv. So, to be honest, this kind of interaction and also acts of kindness in the middle of so much violence and so much poison, because I feel there's something just poisonous in everything now, and just like and violence is trickling down into, and not just now.
Yeah.
I mean, for years and years, but it obviously is really highlighted because the time of war. And in that's what keeps me going, because in that are all these acts of kindness, all these
beautiful acts of service.
Yeah, exactly. This is what. Thank you, because somebody asked me once, what about this drive, but what if they don't talk, or what? And I said, I don't really care, because I just feel I'm just the driver here. I'm just doing service, and I think it just reminds me, and I mean, you can talk about your own experience, but I think what I hear from drives is just reminds of our own humanity. It doesn't solve the conflict, but I think in a certain way there are forces that are so big, and there's so much feeling of helplessness in the face of all this giant. Because look, you probably know even much better. It's way beyond just Israelis and Palestinians. It's like there are so many forces involved in it, and so in order for me to just stay sane, or sane-ish,
close to sane,
as
close to sane as possible,
is to focus on goodness, on kindness, on everything that is 180 degrees the opposite way.
Fakhira, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I found myself moved by a lot of things that you were talking about, but I want, there is two narratives that can be here, and also to touch upon the human interaction, and in time of that, the evilness has expanded between the two people so much, and what kind of these actions. I guess one side can say, okay, this is the structural violence that you were talking about with me. This is an example that Palestinians cannot go to hospitals, and they need the permit. They need to go through checkpoint. They need the help of the Israelis. This is exactly one example for the occupation, what to be under occupation. And is this kind of effort normalizing the occupation, as you say. One side can say this kind of peace building, but I will say that it's normalizing the occupation. You are helping the Palestinian, and you duplicate the same reality in order to make the Israeli face look good. Okay, and you to feel good with the occupation as Israeli. I just want to also support the other narrative as well. But this is one narrative that can be end the occupation instead of helping them, and just normalize the structural violence. But the other things that I cannot ignore is really the human interaction between the both sides, that we don't see it. In the last 20 years, there is split. There is a psychological, political wall between the two societies, that each one see the other as their enemy, so they deserve to be killed. So there is no human interaction. And when you have this human interaction, you transcend the values, transit the national identity, because the national identity today is violent toward the other, is delegitimizing the other, and we need to connect through human values together, because we deserve that. Otherwise we are going to suicide if I will not see the Jewish Israeli as a human person who deserves to live, and the Palestinian who deserve to live in equality and freedom like me. So I will think it's legitimized to kill them. Okay, and when you don't see the person, it's not in your consciousness. So the killing will be very easily, and the support the killing, it will be easily, because he's the enemy, and he's the one deserved to be killed. And I guess this kind of encounter means a lot if we think about in lens of peace building and creating peace, because it expands the human human nature of both sides. Also the Palestinian, that they don't see they see the Israeli as occupier, but this time they see him as helping, as a human like them, as partner with them in this journey. And also the Israeli to see Palestinian and to see Palestinian and to trust them, to be with them in the car and to see them as a human without checking them. Okay, it's like the human nature of interaction is so beautiful that we don't live it. Even the spontaneous encounter between humans, we don't have it anymore in this land, because we are all the time looking to the other in lens of enemy and suspicious,
Right.
and anger
Insecurity.
and hate and security.
Fear,
And we lost
like fear
we lost this human linkages that we can create between people, and we should create between people. I am the opposite. I think encounter between Palestinians and Israeli is needed. It's so much needed in this time, and we need also to change the structure and to struggle against the occupation. But at the same time, we need to have encounter between the two people, because when you meet the other side, he's already in your consciousness.
Yeah.
He
Right.
become part of your consciousness. So you don't, and also your narrative about him and about yourself will be changed in a way that you cannot see him as a monster. He deserves to be. He's part of your future, and this is the tricky things now in our reality. While the dehumanization and the hate and the revenge is expanded so much between the two people. And
Have you seen things getting worse since October 7th? Do you think that? Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
I knew what the answer is going to be, but I'd love for you to share.
I
if
mean,
you could.
we can
Yes.
start about what happens in the 7th of October and the massacre and the horrifying scenes that we saw in the 7th of October in the name of resistance in the name and the response of Israel toward Gaza, the scenes that you see each day from Gaza and the genocide happening toward
Still
the Palestinians,
today.
my people, and we cannot ignore the support, the collective support of what's happening from the Israeli side toward the scenes that there's split. Even I guess most of the Israelis do not care what's happening there, because they have this split and they have it wasn't an easy 7th of October, okay, and it's horrifying, but also the narrative about what happens also
It's triggered the trauma. So
triggered the
triggered
trauma, but
and so
also
there's
how it was used by Israel as a narrative, as a collective narrative, and also in the name, and also about the other side, that they are monsters, they are all Hamas, and they are all supporting Hamas, so that you justify what's going on. And the trauma that there is in the Israeli society, which I understand it, but it's in a way that close their minds and hearts.
Yeah.
They do not see any scenes, and even if they see the scenes, they don't see the Palestinians as a human. All these narratives about the Palestinians that they are not a human, but I cannot say that in the Palestinian side that there is also the collective now, because after they see what's happening in Gaza, there is also majority that are supporting the power, and so both sides think that the power is what's now will work with the other side, like the killing and the fight that will work. They don't think even about a different future between the both sides. And here we have to think about different imagination, how we can imagine both sides living together in time of conflict. And this is the hard thing for the Palestinians and Israelis who work in peace building, how you really in time of escalation and horrifying things, and while the boundaries of evil and hate and revenge like expanded so much, how you plant the seeds for imagination for a different future, and moral imagination, which mean that you imagine the enemy in your web, and in a way that you go in a journey that it contradict what you think, and trust the risk, because this journey is better than the darkness. And I guess who spoke about it is Lederach.
John Paul Lederach.
It's called The Moral Imagination. It's an amazing book that I think Palestinian and Israeli needed to discuss it in this time.
I would push it to radical imagination. It's really being radical about the possible hope, the possible solution that maybe is not seen right now. But if we expand the box and manage the infinite possibilities that we have here, then we can reach that moral imagination, radical imagination, and radical solution.
Definitely, and it's not an easy to do it now while the genocide happening. And
I think it's not easy, but it's an opportunity.
Definitely.
I think it's really an opportunity actually that we're having, because what 7th of October did is bringing the conflict to the living room of the Israelis, and that's what we needed. And so a shift in the narrative also about what are we talking about right now, the structural violence and everything that you mentioned in the early talk that we had.
Yeah, like to realize that continuing to control and fight and military power will not bring security for Israelis, will not bring it. Just you have to look for a solution that give also the Palestinian the freedom, the self-determination and the equality like you, in a way that will really bring security for both sides.
Right. We keep coming back to this idea that there are two processes that have to happen at the same time, and one can't work without the other. One process is the structural political change, and the other is the groundwork, human, everyday, how we see each other, the psychological or sociological shifts, the humanization, what you talked about, the humanization of each other. These two things are intertwined. You can't do one without the other. They're big tasks, big tasks. So any final words that you'd like to share before we sign off about thinking about the peace work, and any insights about, yes?
I want to respond just to something that about the first narrative that you described, because I think obviously it's true. I mean, I can cite for myself. I feel a lot of guilt, and it helps me a little. And I remember the first time that I went to drive some patients. I met another volunteer who was waiting also for the patients to cross, and he asked me, "Do you like driving?" I said, "No, not really." And he says, "So you are here to clear your conscience a little bit." And I said, "Well, it doesn't really help my conscience, but it helped me feel that I'm doing something good."
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's true. On the other hand, not doing anything is not a solution also.
That's
so,
worse.
Yeah,
right?
it's even worse. It's just to say, okay, I can't do anything.
I think, if I may, you're referring to, because you mentioned the word kindness, there's a sentence that says, in a world where you can be anything, be kind.
Yeah.
And I love this sentence. And I think that's what your stories refer to, the kindness, the importance of small acts of kindness that are also acts of service.
I think it's good for the other, but it's good for our own soul.
Yes, exactly.
To not be corrupted.
Yeah.
Because look, I just really quickly, even, on the 7th of October, a few volunteers of Road to Recovery were murdered. Some were taken hostage. Some, at least one is still hostage, or the Lifshitz. And we lost also a lot of volunteers. But also, some new volunteers joined, which is interesting. Some new volunteers joined after the war started.
Me.
For example. For example, right? And so what I'm saying is there has to be, I think what it, I'm just trying to be clear on the thing, because I think we are in a situation always trying to juggle, how to do, and
life.
Coming from privilege, we are privileged. We have, not to talk, look, we're following the coordinator from Gaza. We keep following him and keep supporting as much as we can. And he sent us sometimes photos of that, of the food they're making, that they manage to, and whatever. So we find, I think, peace activists here that are not, that are really, in peace activists who has a network of friends all over, found themselves in this situation where you literally, because you can't pick sides, because you have friends everywhere.
level. Okay, like there is all the time this struggle also between Palestinian Israeli activists. What do we want, just to change the structure first, the occupation, and then we will do peace with Israelis, or we also want to work on the human level? And this is also the struggle among us, the Palestinian and Israeli peace activists, or the Palestinian peace activists, because the occupation continue. How we can continue work on peace while the structural violence continue, and how we navigate all the time between these two levels, also have this human interaction between both sides, and also change the structure. I think it should be intertwined, because this is all the time also the argument about the peace building, but we need to intertwine both levels. And I totally agree with you that we cannot just work about the structural violence and destabilize it and break it without to work about the human interaction, the relationship, the changing the lens that we see each other. Okay, so this is, I guess, the dance or the navigation in this place between the human level and the structural level. And once we find the balance in a way that the human level do not take all the weight, and they allow us to deny the structural violence, or the structural violence take all the argument without to see the human interaction, we cannot make it the change. We have to intertwine both of them.
And what I want to add to this is that what you're describing is the integration between the masculine and the feminine, the structural being the masculine power and the feminine being the human connection. And it is really the peace activation of embodying and integrating the masculine and feminine approach, just like within us. The structure is nothing without the content and the vision, and the content is nothing without the structure. So thank you for this positive note.
Eva, thank you.
Thank you
you,
so much.
Fakhira.
Thank you
Thank you,
both.
Yael.
Yes.
This was, my heart feels like really heavy. So much suffering, that was raised here. And thank you for your work and for not giving up even when it feels like you want to. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you for your commitment. I guess, we look for common values between us in times of darkness.
Yes. Thank you for
It's
that.
not an easy. Thank you so much.